Well, welcome in. Here we go. It is the second day of April. Welcome to Liberation Day. I've got my Liberation Day parade outfit on, so I'm all set. I can't wait to see who's going to lead that parade today. We're waiting to find out exactly what the useful idiot does at 4 o'clock this afternoon as far as the next round of tariffs for Canada, but unbelievably, that's not the only thing on the agenda. So here we are. It's an episode of Politically Speaking on Now and Next. I'm Dave Trafford, and around the table today is our cast, our comms and strategy team. Anne-Marie Aikins is here from AMA Communications. Lindsay Broadhead, also Broadhead Communications. Imagine that, a proud Canadian. You'll notice my note here as well. Bob Reid is with us from Broadway Strategy. And just any special plans for the big parade today for Liberation Day, Lindsay?
If it means being liberated from Mr. Trump, sign me up. Liberation sounds good.
Dave, I haven't even started my shopping yet. That's how behind I am with this Liberation Day.
You're waiting for the Boxing Day sales?
Yeah.
I will have poured my drink by then. So.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, and I think I heard you on the radio this morning, Bob, talking about this and the idea that we have no fucking idea what we're going to get at 4 o'clock.
Yeah. What form is it going to take? How clear will it be? I expect not very. I think it'll probably be as complicated as the last batch where, okay, we're putting tariffs on the auto sector, but only on non-American parts. But by the way, if those non-American parts are covered by the free trade agreement, then that's okay. Like I'm expecting a lot of tea leaves to have to be read to figure out what the hell this is going to be.
Yeah, and to be clear on the lack of clarity, Lindsay, these are the retaliatory tariffs. And even there, the Americans are looking at our GST as a retaliatory tariff. And you don't have to be any kind of big brain wizard on finance or the economy to understand that the GST is not a tariff on American product.
No, it's certainly not. Some Canadians would think it's a tariff on other things, but it has nothing to do with the United States. But even why it's interesting from my point of view anyway, it's not dissimilar to the interview that Premier Ford did this morning, where the American interviewers can quite easily stir and twist facts because the implication sounds like it means something to their American audience. So, we're dealing with two different economies, two different sets of language, acronyms, all of those fun things. So it's quite easy to twist and turn the facts and create this illusion that in the case of the Premier this morning, that we had set up the tariffs first, right? And he was obviously caught on his back foot trying to say, no. But again, you're facing misinformation and disinformation all the time and trying to twist it back to the reality rather than tell the story moving forward. So it's a very complicated comms world to be living in.
Well, and it just so happens that today, Liberation Day, Anne-Marie, also happens to be International Fact Check Day. And the folks at Pointer are waving that flag today. So to Lindsay's point, the level of willful ignorance at one extreme or just lack of understanding of what's going on with the American media writ large is a scary thing for me to see play out, because half the time those who are doing the interviews really don't understand the dynamic of how the tariffs work.
I think I agree with you. And I think that the misinformation is very purposeful, and the disinformation is very purposeful. They know that people aren't going to be able to grasp these concepts very much. And I think as much as however complicated it is, and it's going to be super complicated, he hopes it just cuts through in a very simplified way by using a word like liberation. Why liberation? Does that mean Canada was holding the United States hostage? And that's basically what he's been trying to, put out there in a very simplified way. And so people, if you can't wrap your brain around these complex, what does this all mean? You will grasp onto the simple things like liberation means Canada, doing these bad things to the U.S.
I don't know if you've seen the newsletter that's floating out there. It's called Get Fact, Bob, and Kevin Newman is among those who is sort of pushing this, and it's about sort of fact checking as we go, understanding where the disinformation and the misinformation is. And if you haven't done so already, I would encourage any of you to take a good look at that and subscribe to it, because it comes in daily and it's got some really interesting perspectives on it. But one of the things that was in the newsletter yesterday, I think, Bob, to Anne-Marie's point, was the use of the word repatriation. We're repatriating our auto industry. Well, it's like as if somebody took it away from you, right? And there's that kind of, we're going to stand our ground and get it back, what was once ours. Well, again, that's just a whole level of, repeat the lie until you believe it.
Right. And why should we expect anything any differently? Because Trump's MO has always been about the simple bumper sticker level articulation of policy, even when it's factually wrong. I mean, how many times has he portrayed a trade deficit that the United States has, a very small one, and actually not one if you take energy out of the equation? But the fact that you've got a country that has 10 times the population of its trading partner and they buy more stuff from us, he equates into a subsidy. We're subsidizing, or the US is subsidizing Canada to the tune of the dollar amount of the trade differential, which is obviously not the case by any stretch, but we live in an incredibly short attention span world. Trump's followers are at the head of that line. They don't pay attention to details. They don't really care to understand the details by and large. And so they're more than willing to take what he says as gospel. And some of this stuff is really Byzantine. I'm fascinated, and I'm waiting to see actually what if he does on the Canadian dairy sector, which is highly protected, always has been, but it's firewall protected, right? We have an agreed upon amount of American dairy that can come into the Canadian market with no tariff whatsoever. If it goes past a certain threshold, if the volume of American dairy coming into Canada crosses over the set threshold, then very high tariffs kick in, like well over, I think it's 270%, which is a figure you hear bandied about by Trump and company on the unfairness of tariffs. Some Americans that I follow on social media say, yeah, cry me a river about a 25% tariff when you're charging 270% on us. Well, the fact is we're not. That only kicks in if that agreed upon quota of American dairy coming to Canada gets exceeded. And the fact is they've never even come close. The American dairy producers will tell you that. We've never gotten near where that level is. So those tariffs have never kicked in. Are they on the books? Yes. Do they look scary? Are they easy to manipulate as a result? Yes. So this is what we're going to have to dig through when the final word comes down after the close of markets today. And that's no coincidence either. He knows this is going to send things into a tailspin yet again.
Yeah, of course. And, just on the U.S. dairy, Lindsay, if you want like 6 knuckles on one finger, you might want to drink U.S. made dairy product, because all the crap that's in there. And I don't think people realize that in terms of what they allow into their dairy product. I mean, the cattle have antibiotics and all of this stuff we don't do here in Canada. So there's a good reason why we want to keep, not just because of the market, but why we want to keep the American dairy product on the American side of the border. But to Bob's point, it's so easy to take these numbers and spin them out, and away we go. I heard, John Moore talking to Tim Hudak this morning saying, where the hell are the economists that actually think tariffs are good? Let's equate the two of them. But there is a school of thought there
in fact,
that works,
right? That's what's happening. He's quite literally firing, not necessarily the economists, but maybe them too. Certainly the medical professionals. Any checks and balances in terms of fact, history, cultural context are being removed. If you have two parties it's like the art of the negotiation, right? You need two parties that have some sort of common interest in order to get to a negotiation. When you have two parties where one wants to land on a deal, and in fact we had the deal right in the new title of the North American free trade policy that I can never remember. However, the deal exists, and in fact the person who's disrupting the deal signed the deal, said the deal was great, right? So you've got someone who's not a rational player in this game of negotiation. We can't get to a place of a constructive conclusion if we don't want to be honest and we don't want to be truthful about how deals are forged. If this entire thing is a game about public spin, and frankly, public spin for other intended consequences that we're still trying to figure out, we need to start playing games with other entities. And in this case, it means other countries. It's not to, I think Flavio Volpe, who's done a Herculean job at representing car parts manufacturers, and quite frankly speaking on behalf of Canada and trade in many ways. I think he was very good at saying, this isn't in the short term about killing deals with the US. We can't shoot ourselves in the foot. We need to kind of press through. But at the same time, we have to be building aggressively connections to other markets, to other people who are rational players, who see point in negotiation. That's what this is about.
Well, Anne-Marie, I heard somebody, say, well, at what point do we just have to stop trying to explain tariffs to Donald Trump? Because we can do that. We just can't understand it for him. So we got to move on.
Oh, exactly. I think, and I honestly think that this is it's a game that he plays about not understanding things. I think he does understand things, and we don't understand, I think, what his end game completely is. I think it's all about money for sure. He talks about, again, back to liberation, that liberation means, and it's about making the U.S. Wealthy again, like they're not wealthy now. They're, one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and he is making up this emergency, which he has to have an emergency. And first it was fentanyl, and now it's I don't know what his emergency now is. It's just in the word liberation, like they're already at war, and they need to. That's why they need to open the deal again, because it has to have an emergency, and he just keeps making it up. I think he totally understands it. And he has economists, I think, that tell him these things, but he has decided he's going to defraud and lie to the American people. And many of them elected him and still believe him, but many don't. But at this point in time, he's going to create damage that is going to take a generation to undo. I believe it can be undone, but it's going to create a generation of damage that we're going to have to recover from.
Well, I saw the newsletter today from David Coletto at Abacus, Bob, and he was talking about the distinct issues that people are emotionally responding to on the federal campaign. And right now, it's not a ballot question. It's affordability and Trump are the sort of the two lanes right now. And that there's one demographic, certainly the conservative core, who are looking at this and saying life is not affordable for me, and blame the Trudeau liberals and the legacy there. On the other hand, Trump is coming, buckle up, we got to deal with this. Carney's the guy to deal with that. So right now, and it seems odd to me, but maybe I'm just not paying attention. It seems odd to me that we have two different distinct siloed definitions of the issue. If Trump is not an affordability issue, I don't know what is. Yeah. So at what point do those paths begin to cross? And that's really going to have an effect on our campaign in the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, there is a disconnect there. And that's what's going to, I would assume, and / hope, shake itself out over the remainder of the campaign, for people to really come to a landing, and particularly conservative core voters is Donald Trump really a problem? Is he that big of a problem? Because Poilievre's not saying that. He keeps saying, yeah, this is a bump in the road. I'm paraphrasing here, but that our trading relationship with the U.S. can be salvaged, can get back to normal. We can work through this. We can get past it. Versus Carney saying that relationship's over. The relationship that we have had for so long is now over, and we have to move forward. And I think that's where that split comes in, is between people viewing this as, is it irreparable damage, or is it something that we just need to deal with, grapple with, find a way to fix, and move forward? So I think it's going to be telling as things move through the rest of this campaign, and as more people come to a landing in terms of how they view that, and then look at who is best placed to lead us through this, whichever variant of that scenario that you subscribe to, then who's the guy to get us through is going to be clearly the question at the end of it.
Yeah, Lindsay, the idea that there is that distinction between the two of them, and I was just listening to a Poilievre newser here. I think he's in Toronto today, and they had the feed up on CBC, and somebody asked him, why have you not reached out to the White House and made any connection? And to his credit, he said there is only one prime minister. There will only ever be one prime minister at a time. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't make any sense for me to step into that and to offer an opinion, to engage in any level of conversation with the executive in Washington. That's not my job, essentially, is what he was saying. And he said it wouldn't be productive. So, and oddly enough, the tone in his delivery today, very much, sort of eye contact, forthright. He's not kind of coming over the top with that kind of beady-eyed grins he can kind of get into when he gets going. I'm seeing it change now. Maybe just anecdotal with this one newser, but there's a maybe a sense that the insiders in the Tory party who are saying you need a change, maybe somebody's listening.
Yeah, I'm currently at a client meeting, and my two colleagues were just at the session live, and the first thing they said was just that his tone had changed. His audience was primarily, business and or Tory leaning individuals, right? So perhaps a little bit more of a friendly crowd. But it was noted that his tone had changed, and the discourse was a little bit around Trump. Look, I think he or anyone else is right in not stepping into the fray or taking on the role. We've talked week after week about the importance of the Canada First approach, right? That all of our actions by leaders are coordinated. That's important. I also think it's a little bit cute by half, right? There's a way to speak to the public. There's a way to speak to constituents about major news items, certainly about tariffs, certainly about Trump, certainly about the annexation of Canada, whether you sit in the prime seat or not. So I take that particular sentiment with a huge grain of salt. Though certainly, what he's saying is that he doesn't want to replace the prime minister's voice, of course, of course. But I think overall, the convergence of strategy is one of kind of an individualism, right? That Pierre Poilievre is taking, where he's going to be talking more and more about issues that relate to individuals domestically on the ground. So what they're seeing and living every day, and seeing if that appeals, versus more of a collectivism, which, I think the Liberals and Carney's team are trying to straddle. He's having to look internationally, and certainly he's being given the pulpit to speak. So that's a huge advantage from a Liberal point of view. He's going to have to straddle, though, this idea of being prime minister and being on that international stage while still having policy and language that translates to our lived experience. So whether it's the cost of housing, healthcare, safety, et cetera. And you see it in some of the policies, but those are huge worlds that are quite different. First of all, the individualist and that more collective experience, but from the Liberal point of view, in particular, from a message point of view, I think it's quite difficult to straddle those huge different worlds in such a short period.
Well, I think that one of the telling things, Anne-Marie, might be in the next few weeks is to actually do an audit the number of times Poilievre uses the phrase World Economic Fund. And the less he does so, I think it's going to be more to the point where, okay, we got to move this ship, change direction, because they were hammering away on that still for week one. And who the hell's paying any attention to that kind of what is on the verge of conspiracy theory?
Yeah, I think people have got enough with the conspiracy theories right now. And I think Poilievre answered that question in a very safe way by putting, again, some distance between him and Trump, because he has spent the last few years with talking points that are very similar to Trump's in nature. And it's very hard for him now to denounce Trump when he has talked so much like him, whether it was women's issues or wokeism and all of those. They're very similar talking points. And it's just hard for him to distance himself. So I think that answer was to try and create some distance. Well, it's not my job. I'm not the prime minister. He should have segued. It was a good answer, but it's only half complete, I think, as Lindsay was saying. He needed to segue on how the issues that are affecting people, like affordability, like being able to buy a home, pay the rent, buy food, all of those things are still intense concerns for people, but now they're conflated with the tariffs. And so any issue needs to be joined with tariffs. It has to be put in that light. And why the urgency is just much more urgent now. And it is really difficult to cut through. I was talking about the Carney's housing plan is quite extensive and detailed. And if you read it, reads very much like a wartime plan than how we built houses after the last war. And that's what's needed now. But it was very complex with seniors issues, youth issues, but it didn't really get any attention. I think the subject matter got some attention, but we need to, when we talk about those issues, we need to talk about tariffs at the exact same time.
Well, and to be fair, I mean, I only listened to that first part of the answer, but I know he was continuing to talk, and I would be shocked if he did not talk about the lost decade. So, in terms of the context of his yes. answer, but exactly. Back to Anne-Marie's point, Bob, and as I watched this play out, and I've asked John Wright this question, and he said, "Well, let's see how this kind of looks midweek," and so we're on top of that as far as polling is concerned. And I realized that there are two lanes that we've defined here. But what degree do you think there's just sort of this visceral need for trust? That's who can I trust with my future in this country? It's got nothing to do with the politics of it. Who is it that I can trust? I think it's coming down to that.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that's what people are looking for. That's what people are asking themselves. Who has my confidence that they will be able to do the job, to deal with Trump and the tariffs and everything else that he might throw at us? Who's best equipped to do that? Whose character, whose persona, whose resume? All of these things are coming to bear. This is an entirely reactive election campaign so far, right? There's been, despite efforts, and I actually commend Poilievre for more, I think, than Carney, although they're both doing it, but just based on the TV in the background and me looking at podium signs, Poilievre seems to be putting out the Gainsburger of the day in terms of here's the new policy that I want to focus on today, probably knowing that any announcement he makes is going to get blown over by whatever comes out of Washington on a given day, and he will be clipped responding to that and that only. But the fact that there is policy being put out, Anne-Marie just talked about the extensive liberal housing policy. no one's focusing on that because the nature of this campaign is entirely reactive. And that's kind of sad. We're not having a debate about proposals that are being put forward and plans that have been developed and platforms and costing and all of the things that, normally are part of the play-by-play of an election campaign. Now, maybe we'll get there. Maybe we will hit a point of Trump and tariff fatigue over the arc of this. We've still got basically another month almost left in this campaign. I think those things will come into play to a bigger degree than they have thus far. And I think the leaders' debate is going to be a very, very high level, high wire act, particularly for Mark Carney, because he's not used to that environment. Pierre Poilievre is. Carney's looked very shaky this week with his MP Paul Chang, first in defending him and then in acknowledging that he's decided to withdraw and we'll have to find a new candidate there. When he was speaking to that, because it's off script for him, it's unplanned, it's a bump in the road that he wasn't expecting, he's pretty shaky. There's a lot of hems and haws and ums, and he doesn't seem well equipped because he doesn't have the experience in being quick on his feet. So I'm really looking forward to that leaders debate because I think it's going to be a real challenge for Carney and a real strength for Poilievre. So you can bet there's going to be a lot of debate prep done behind liberal doors ahead of that one.
So let me ask you, follow up then on that, Bob, because when we talk about the posture and the reactive as opposed to responsiveness of this campaign, mm-hmm. Are we at a place where we're actually electing a wartime prime minister?
Oh, very much so. Very much so. Which is why it comes down to trust and confidence and who looks like the man for the job. That's the fundamental decision point. This ballot question. I mean, they're all framing it pretty correctly, I think, but it's not going to be a brain decision. It's going to be a gut decision when it comes to marking the ballot.
Yeah. So with that, then, Lindsay, and I realize the media loves this, and it's the wonks in the back rooms and the war rooms all jump all over it. But does it matter at all that the Tories had to kick out two of their candidates, in the last day, and the Paul Chang thing? I think it's a different issue for Carney because he came out and waved a flag for the guy. I mean, I don't know who the hell was advising him on that. But at the end of this, in terms of what Bob's just framed, does any of that matter?
It matters to a certain degree. So if we dwell on the idea of trust for just a second, I'm thinking about what the antithesis of the idea of trust is right now. And I don't think it's mistrust or misinformation. I think it's fear. So if the guiding principles right now are largely fear, then trust matters in a way that probably it hasn't before. And I'd agree with Bob and the idea of your question around this being a wartime type of election. Certainly nothing that I've seen in my lifetime. It feels more like of my grandparents' era, frankly, and what you read about in your history books. But I do think there's a residual feeling of anger that is still there. So anger against the Liberal Party, anger for what people have had to endure for any number of reasons, but they certainly placed it on a federal Liberal Party in many cases. Or on the other side, anger towards what we're seeing seep up from the southern border and permeating our culture, and that anger may be more directed, rightly or wrongly, towards the Tories. Those are kind of the decided voters, right? The angry people on either side are decided. It's more philosophical. The fear people are looking towards trust. So anything you do to diminish that trust or that holding on to something is quite consequential. I can't tell you whether those particular moments will remain sticky There's still a lot more campaign to go. But anything that Carney, I think in particular, does to lose the sense of trust that he's gained and the traction he's made, it feels like it could be a snap decision, and someone just says, you know what, these guys are exactly the same, different colors. I'm going to go back to where I was before. So it feels very consequential.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Interesting that, you know, when you start to look at how the polls are splitting, Anne-Marie, and John Wright and I were talking about it last week, and I posted a short on YouTube when John was explaining that the boomers have kind of shifted over, not completely en masse, but a lot of them have moved over to the liberal side of the ledger, and that the younger demographic is kind of hanging in there with Poilievre and the conservatives. And I posted it on LinkedIn, and it blew up because then there was this argument between, you know, Gen Z and Gen X and the boomers, and you boomers are only trying to take care of yourselves and everything that's in your future and so on. And accusing them, well, those idiot boomers are voting liberal. What's wrong with them? Those idiot boomers pretty much always voted liberal back when we were voting back in the 60s and the 70s. So that hasn't changed. But to me, it's not about political stripe anymore. It's almost about, you know, where you are at this point in your life and how this election is going to affect you.
Well, I think it gets a little more complex than that too when you look at the gender disparity of who votes for who, and we are seeing that women are far more likely to vote for Mark Clancy than over Poilievre. So I think, and as Lindsay said, and I think we've talked about before, is this election is going to be very much fear-based, which people will react to. Who's the adult in the room that's going to be able to stand up to Donald Trump, and who can take care of us for the next while he's in power. So they really are looking for the adult in the room that they instinctively trust more. So it all comes down to that instinctively. If you are thinking more logically and not fear-based, then you're especially if your finances are in a very stable position, or conversely, you are, still can't get into the housing market. You still can't really even get a job that stays. You may react in a much more logical way. But so many of us, I think, are reacting in a fear-based way. And that will be instinctively who is going to be able to handle Trump. I think, as to Bob's point, Clancy, Mark is really showing his inexperience in dealing with the media, but I am impressed with the way that he keeps himself open to doing media and being out there and answering questions, even tough questions, where Poilievre is insulated himself so much from media. There aren't media on his following him as closely on his campaign. He limits questions to 4 questions, no follow-ups, and he chooses the four outlets. So he's restricted it. So he tries to put out his own media as much as he can, so it delimits the mistakes and the errors that he can make with media. But I think in the last day or day and a half, they have dropped 3 candidates now. They dropped one at midnight last night, but they have dropped them so fast, most of us don't even know what they did or why they're being dropped, because they'll be off the airways fast, where unfortunately the one a liberal was, it was a part of a narrative for a few days. So that resulted in the Toronto Star had a full article just about that candidate rather than the 3 conservative candidates.
So, Bob, it brings us back to this idea that inevitably, if we talk about that level of fear, we talk about the demographic splits, we talk about the 2 lanes, affordability and Trump. I think it's inevitable that those 2 things will cross paths, because you can actually say that, the boomers are worried about affordability because if the stock market tanks, my investments for my retirement take a dump. Mm-hmm. If that happens, it's going to cost more for lumber, et cetera. So the new house that we need to get the the 25 to 50-year-olds into sooner than later, that's going to be a problem. So I don't see a world where these two things don't become the same place.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, they're intrinsically linked, and that's what's before us. That's what's been the reality ever since Trump came along and started saber rattling in the first place. They are completely linked, and that's why we're seeing the Team Canada approach that we are, and the relentless efforts to try and make the case south of the border that tariffs are taxes on your future and our future, and that Trump and our economy and our affordability domestically are all connected. And there, you've got cause and effect happening all the way around that circle. So there is, it's not that they will become connected; they are connected.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the one variable here, because we're so close to it, Lindsay, is, there are other major markets around the world that are going to be affected within the next 6 hours by all of this. And, the EU is standing on its hind legs already, saying we are the largest economy in this part of the world. So, pretty much don't fuck with us because we're ready to punch back.
Yeah, no, it's this is what is so obtuse about, and I can't get my head around about Trump's strategy here, is that he's mobilizing the other major markets to work together. So it's really bizarre. It just feels to me like he's imploding his own nation, and I don't want to get into conspiracy theory land because my brain starts spinning and, you start thinking about the wrong things. But I, yes, this is going to hurt Canada, but it's going to hurt everyone else. And the conversations have been happening for months now. So deals are being made, right? They've been made. There's plans already in place. I have faith in that. What they are will be announced in due course once we understand what's going to be thrown at us today at 4:00 and we interpret it in the hours and days that follow.
Yeah, if there's any level
crazy.
of encouragement on that, though, Anne-Marie, is that I'm hearing, some fairly straightforward economists saying it's tariffs or no tariffs. This will be similar to what we went through 2008, 2009. We'll hit the recession, and in a strange way, we're also better prepared for it. And as much as we do see it coming, we don't know quite what's coming, but we do see it coming. Where the economy sort of blew up around us in the economic crisis, but that in fact we came through that. Now, not without any grief or pain or anxiety, but we did. And the point being, it might be 2 or 3, 4 years by the time we kind of really settle back in, but we'll manage this, that we'll get through it. And we, in the long run, will probably be better for it.
I completely agree. I've been listening to more economists the last couple of days that have talked about, Canada has survived 15 recessions. We have survived them, and we have been through wars, and your economies are always, they change and after either a recession or a wartime. It changes, and it usually gets stronger. And I think this is such a threat to us as a nation that it's inspired a lot of different things. And I think if anything can come out of this, is that it put a fire under all of our asses to do something about it, to get more committed to Canadian made, Canadian produced, Canadian workers. It just that I have never seen this kind of, in my time, the nationalism that is so strong right now. But it'll also, I think, the economic barriers that we set up for ourselves, that I think a lot of us weren't even really aware of, especially the interprovincial barriers that are there, that are just silly and it can be fixed. And I'm hoping that it does light us fire under our ass. But I really am going to be listening carefully to, after Trump says his complicated spiel. What Carney, of course, has to say. But I'm really interested in what Poilievre has to say. I really want to hear those two leaders that are really has become a two-horse race, what they have to say about what should happen now and what they're going to propose to do. And not necessarily they can do, but what their ideas are. Those are really important, I think, to the campaign. And this is a moment in time that they both can, we can see, do I trust that response to Trump?
I'm looking at the poll tracking here, and 338 Canada, Bob, has the Liberals with today's projections at 191 seats.
Wow.
The folks at the CBC with Eric Grenier, 202.
Wow.
And the Toronto Star's polling tracker has them at 189. And then if you go back and you look at all of the polls that they've done at 338, what I found astounding today is that they had the columns set up, and the lead was based on a color code. So if the Tories were leading, it was a blue in the column and vice versa. 6 weeks ago, it was all blue up and down, and now it's all red.
Yeah.
And that is a variable. I mean, I realize people say there's still 26 days. There's a lot of campaigning to do. That's going to mean a huge bounce is required for the Conservatives, because they're going to have to hit that, whatever the bottom is, and bounce up in a hurry to make the difference. And the only way they do that is if Jagmeet Singh becomes a more likely choice for Canadians. And I don't see that happening.
No, nor do I. But yeah, the Conservatives are banking on that. They need that. They need a little more life in the bloc as well on that score. So, this is the horse race that nobody saw coming, and nobody would have made book on not that long ago. And it's really remarkable how things have shifted so quickly and so decisively. And I was thinking about this the other day, that Justin Trudeau's gotten off the hook, I think, as a result of this, right? There was a lot of anger within his own party that he stuck around too long. He wasn't reading the room. He didn't understand the visceral level of distaste for him to continue on. And that finally push had to come to shove to get him out the door. And now we're trying to save the furniture. It's too late. That's gone now. That's gone with Carney in contention, and things have turned around so remarkably quickly. Nobody would have seen this coming, and this campaign is really going to matter. There is still a lot of campaigning left to do. We always say campaigns matter, but this one really matters. And this one really will matter in terms of the performance of the two front running leaders. And are they able to maintain, to hold on to solidify, or are they in trouble of seeing things slip away? And that's a wide open question right now.
Well, Lindsay, it's also the question of whether or not you're looking forward or you're looking backward. And when I say that, back to Bob's point about Trudeau, if he had still been in the seat, all of the Conservative attack would have been look back at 10 years and what he has done. And he keeps talking about the past 10 years. I think most people want to look at the next 10 years because we know that they're going to be remarkably different. So if there's a change in tone there, it has to be more forward thinking rather than, Trudeau's done. Carbon tax is done. All that stuff I heard somebody say the other day, it's like, Poilievre is the knight that shows up at the beginning of the movie and the dragon's already dead. Right? Like he's got nothing to kill. So now what are you going to do for me?
Well, and what he's trying to do is save the princess, right? Like that's why he's looking domestically, if I really want to extend your metaphor. What's your question? Sorry, I completely I got so overwhelmed by the dragon.
No, but the point is that the dragon was in the past.
The past.
We've got to look forward, right?
So yeah, like bouncing off of what Bob was saying, I don't know if Trudeau got off the hook, and I think we're saying the same thing, to be fair. Like I think, Trudeau in a grocery store in Edmonton or Calgary or, somewhere not in a liberal downtown core anywhere in Canada, may still get tomatoes thrown at him. However, before he left, the unknown was, will he pay the price? Is he the brand problem? Or are the Liberals, are they going to pay the price, and are they the brand problem? With the emergence of Carney, with the emergence of a very defined, enemy, as it were, in Trump, that question and that debate has sailed, right? We know that Trudeau was the problem. The Liberals have returned. They've shaken up the soup a little bit in terms of who's there. But to your point, all eyes are on the prize. And the prize is a new economy that has autonomy to it, and a domestic heft that we probably haven't seen, I don't know, in generations ever. I'm not sure.
Just to clarify, when I said Trudeau has gotten off the hook, I meant within his own party, among Liberals. Yeah.
Well, and I think nationally, though, he becomes the sin eater. I mean, if we want to extend the mythological
keep going.
ideas, but he's the one that can absorb all of the grief and let everybody else rise above it, because they've distanced themselves from what he's had to say and do. All right, folks, let's leave it there. I'll be back in a couple of weeks, and I'll be able to tell you all about my trip to Nunavut. I'm heading up there next week, so we're
super cool.
First,
have fun.
Well, it is. Great. Although I looked at the forecast, it'll only be -5. So
balmy.
T-shirt and shorts weather for the folks up there in Nunavut, but because today it's like -28. So
I'm actually going to be in the U.S. for a couple of days coming up, so I will have some report back for you as well, I'm sure.
Thoughts and prayers, Bob. Thoughts and
prayers. Godspeed, brother.
There will be no maple leaves on my attire. I'm down there. I'm just going to keep my head.
Yeah, I was going to say, just if you have a problem at the border getting back in, I don't know who can help you, but we'll spread the word. That'll be fine.
Appreciate it.
All right. Lindsay Broadhead, Bob Reid, Anne-Marie Aikins, they are our cast, our comms and strategy team here on Now and Next. And this is during the election campaign, politically speaking, because, well, what else is there to talk about? And tomorrow we will record our weekly session of On the Ledge, your Ontario Politics podcast. Kathleen Wynne, Tim Hudak, Keith Leslie, and John Wright will be in the room. And we've also got an extra episode of On the Ledge this week, because it was National Caregiver Day. And it's one of those things here in Ontario that is remarkably overlooked, but it's widely experienced. And for those of you who are listening and watching, at some point in your life, you have been or will be or will continue to be a caregiver. And the cost of that, our systems are not built for it. So we'll drop that into the On the Ledge feed as well. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And otherwise, you can share the show if you're listening on iHeart, Apple, or Spotify, etc. Thanks for being here. I'm Dave Trafford for Story Studio Network.